Okay, let's jump right into this explainer, because today we're unpacking one of history's most polarizing and, frankly, contradictory figures. I want you to picture a man on horseback, deep in the heart of Central Asia. His right arm is severely damaged, and he walks with his heavy limp, a lasting reminder of a brutal skirmish from his youth. Now, he wasn't born a royal heir or anything like that. He was just a local upstart who actually came incredibly close to dying young. Yet this very same man grew to become a conqueror who single-handedly altered the entire trajectory of the world. We're talking about Timur, or as he's often known in the West, Tamerlane. And today, we're diving deep into the massive, baffling paradox of his existence.
So let's start right off the bat with a really staggering fact. 17 to 20 million. That is the estimated death toll attributed to Timur's relentless conquests. To put that into perspective, he eradicated a genuinely massive percentage of the entire global population at the time. I mean, when he marched his armies across borders, what was left in his wake was often literally nothing more than the stench of blood and just utter, complete devastation.
And right there, that brilliantly illustrates our central paradox today. How in the world can we possibly reconcile this unimaginable scale of bloodshed with a man who simultaneously built one of the most culturally vibrant, artistically advanced, and economically prosperous empires on Earth? Like, how does a warlord famous for unparalleled ruthlessness also become this deeply passionate patron of poetry, architecture, and trade? Well, let's break it down.
Section 1. The Architect of Terror.
Before we can even touch on the art and the commerce, we absolutely have to acknowledge the utter darkness of his military campaigns. We're talking about the sheer terror of his tactics. Timur was a man who literally left mountains of skulls behind him. It was a calculated, chilling message to anyone who even thought about opposing him. Perhaps most notoriously, after a rebellion in the city of Isfahan, he ordered this horrifying massacre, literally commanding his troops to build towering minarets out of the severed heads of the city's people. From India to Iran to the Ottoman Empire, this limping, injured warrior transformed into a completely unstoppable force. He demonstrated a level of cruelty that made entire kingdoms tremble if you even mentioned his name.
Section 2. The Clash of Empires.
What's genuinely fascinating about his military strategy, though, is how systematically he dismantled rival superpowers. He didn't just stumble into random battles. He engineered the collapse of massive empires with totally calculated precision. His relentless push west at the dawn of the 15th century was just staggering. In 1400, he sweeps through Armenia and Georgia, leaving thousands dead. But notice what he does next. He deliberately captures and burns the great cities of Damascus and Aleppo. This wasn't mindless destruction, guys. It was a highly strategic move specifically designed to sever the Ottoman Empire's land communication and supply lines, completely cutting them off from any foreign aid.
And this strategic masterclass culminated at the 1402 Battle of Ankara. Timur didn't just defeat the Ottomans there, he utterly humiliated their leader, Sultan Bayezid. Historical accounts and legends tell us that Timur actually captured the Sultan and paraded him around in an iron cage. So Timur's psychological warfare was honestly just as potent as his cavalry, and it effectively brought one of the era's absolute greatest empires straight to its knees.
Section 3. Poetry, Patronage, and Legend.
So just as we've established him as this ruthless monster, we have to pivot completely to his contradictory nature as a scholar and a patron. Because almost as soon as the blood dried, Timur the Conqueror became Timur the Builder. He was known to have memorized the Quran, and remarkably, right in the middle of his massacres, he would routinely issue strict orders to spare the lives of scientists, scholars, and artists so he could bring them back to his capital. Which brings us to one of the most famous stories about him. Legend has it that when Timur conquered the city of Shiraz around 1387, he summoned the universally revered Persian poet Hafez. Timur demanded to know why Hafez had offered to give away Timur's beloved magnificent cities of Samarkand and Bukhara in a famous poem, all just in exchange for the mole on a beautiful woman's cheek.
The story goes that Timur angrily confronted the poet, demanding, "I ruined the world to build Samarkand and Bukhara, and you sell them for a mole?" This just brilliantly illustrates his fierce, borderline obsessive pride in the capital he had built from the ashes of his conquests. He really saw his cities as the absolute crown jewels of the world.
But Hafez, who was quick-witted and apparently completely fearless, gestured to his own ragged, impoverished clothing and delivered this legendary reply. He said, "It is because of such generosity that I am in this miserable state." And apparently this brilliant, witty comeback completely disarmed the terrifying warlord. Instead of executing Hafez, Timur just laughed, richly rewarded him, and let him go. It's this perfect little story that encapsulates a conqueror who genuinely deeply respected intellect and the arts.
Actually, scratch that a bit because we do need to note that academic research urges some caution here. According to a 1991 analysis by researcher Bijan Samadi, this whole legendary meeting might actually be historically impossible. The documented year of Hafez's death and the timeline of Timur's arrival in Shiraz have some pretty major contradictions. But, whether it's a literal fact or just a cultural myth, it absolutely captures Timur's dual reputation to a T, the man with a bloody sword in one hand and a beautiful poem in the other.
Section 4. Master of the Silk Road.
Beyond the poetry and the warfare, let's explore how this guy was actually a total mastermind of global trade. He didn't just want to conquer the world, he wanted to own its commerce. To pull this off, he forcefully reshaped the entire geography of global economics. Before Timur came along, a massive amount of wealth flowed through the northern Silk Road, places like Khwarezm, Tana, and Kaffa up north of the Caspian Sea. Timur purposefully and violently choked off those northern routes. Why? Because his goal was to forcefully divert all of that incredibly lucrative Silk Road traffic south, piping it directly into his own territories through cities like Tabriz, Sultania, Herat, and of course, his absolute jewel, Samarkand.
And according to some fascinating academic research by Vali Dinparast on Timur's trade policies, this aggressive geographical shift wasn't just about stroking his ego or showing control. It caused an absolute economic boom. The wealth of the known world suddenly started pouring directly into the Persian and Central Asian spheres, which completely funded the massive cultural renaissance that Timur envisioned.
He didn't just stop at shifting the routes either. He backed it all up with serious infrastructure. He wasn't just looting for the sake of looting. He was building a highly systematic, sustainable economy. He constructed these massive, extensive caravansaries to guarantee the strict safety of merchants traveling on his roads. He implemented a highly regulated toll known as the Tamga tax, which completely filled his state's coffers. He actively forged foreign trade relations with neighboring and Western nations, and he fostered a massive domestic boom in agriculture and textiles, especially silk. In so many ways, he was a genuine economic visionary.
Section 5. A complex, bloody legacy.
So, bringing this all together, we arrive at our final conclusion. How on earth do we evaluate the legacy of a man who is so sharply divided? How do we synthesize the pyramids of skulls with the booming Silk Roads? The historian Marcel Briand probably hit the nail on the head when he noted that Timur was an extremist in every single sense of the word. He was driven by an unyielding, almost terrifying willpower. He was simply incapable of doing anything by half measures, whether that was the total destruction of a civilization or the creation of a brand new one. He gave everything to his conquests, and he gave everything to his capital.
It's truly the ultimate historical juxtaposition. On the one hand, you have the architect of terror, who slaughtered up to 20 million people and essentially ruined the world. On the other hand, you have the patron who birthed the exquisite Timurid Renaissance, an era of breathtaking Islamic mosques, incredibly complex blue and white ceramics, unparalleled miniature paintings, and stunning architecture that literally still influences the region today.
And this just leaves us with a really profound and honestly maybe unanswerable question about the nature of historical legacy. How should history judge a figure who both destroyed the world and then turned around and rebuilt it in his own image? How do we weigh unspeakable, horrifying cruelty against undeniable, lasting cultural and economic contributions? Like, can a monster also be a mastermind?
As we wrap up this explainer, I think the biggest takeaway here is that historical truths are rarely ever simple, monolithic narratives. The history of this region is just packed with these hidden, often super uncomfortable complexities, where absolute brilliance and utter brutality basically walk hand in hand. To uncover more of these fascinating, contradictory, and hidden stories from the region, make sure you subscribe to Untold Persia. What do you guys think about Timur's legacy? Let that paradox sink in and keep questioning the past.